You might think you know The Dark Knight Returns, but here are 12 facts you may not have known about everyone's favorite dystopian Batman future. The Dark Knight Returns was a 4-issue miniseries that began in 1986, written and drawn by Frank Miller, with inks by Klaus Janson and colors by Lynn Varley. It tells the story of a 55-year-old Bruce Wayne who returns to being Batman after 10 years of retirement. When the series was first published, it was simply referred to as The Dark Knight, with individual issues being titled The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Triumphant, Hunt the Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Falls. It wasn't until the miniseries was collected in one volume that the series as a whole received the title The Dark Knight Returns. Miller was inspired to write the story of an older Batman when he realized that when he turned 30, he would be older than Batman, who by editorial mandate is eternally 29. Additionally, he pulled inspiration from the 1983 film Sudden Impact, in which Dirty Harry Callahan returns to fighting crime after a long period away. One of the more notable characters in the series is Carrie Kelly, the first girl to bear the mantle of Robin. Miller was urged to include a female Robin by fellow artist John Byrne, who showed him a drawing by Love and Rockets artist Jamie Hernandez of his character Maggie dressed as Robin. Another notable aspect of the series is the unique slang employed by young people in it, especially the mutant street gang. This strange, futuristic mode of speaking was modeled after the way Miller's then-wife and colorist Lynn Varley's brothers, named Don and Rob, just like the main mutant characters, spoke in real life. Varley brothers don't shiv. Frank Miller was not particularly concerned with current Batman continuity when he wrote his Batman stories. One instance of this is that he refers to Commissioner Gordon's wife as Sarah, even though her name was canonically Barbara at the time. Miller explains this by introducing Sarah Essen in his later story, Batman Year One, as Gordon's partner and second wife. The much-maligned font Comic Sans was inspired by a combination of the lettering in Dark Knight Returns by John Costanza and the lettering by Dave Gibbons in Watchmen, because those were the two comics font designer Vincent Kinnair had on his desk when he created the typeface. At one point in the story, an older Oliver Queen implies that he lost one of his arms because it was ripped off by Superman. This plot point is referenced years later in the story for Green Arrow number 100, in which Green Arrow's arm is trapped in a bomb and Superman tries to amputate it to save Oliver's life. Batman makes a marked change from the hero who would have been familiar to readers of the comics in the early 80s to a more violent and ruthless vigilante. This is reflected in Batman's shift over the course of the story from his then-contemporary blue and gray costume to the black and gray Ovalist costume of his earlier, more violent adventures of the 1940s. While today The Dark Knight is regarded by many as the best Batman story of all time, a contemporary review of the series from the New York Times called it convoluted, difficult to follow, and crammed with far too much text. The art was called grotesque. The Dark Knight has been adapted into a segment from the Legends of the Dark Knight episode of the New Batman Adventures, as well as into a 2-part direct-to-video animated adaptation. Additionally, the story served as inspiration for notable elements in The Dark Knight Rises and Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. 15 years after the release of The Dark Knight Returns, Miller and Varley put out a sequel called The Dark Knight Strikes Again, a story which serves as a warning against the dangers of holding on to the past. 15 years after that saw the release of The Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, co-written with Brian Azzarello, with art by Andy Kubert and Klaus Janson. That's it for this episode of You Think You Know Comics. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Comics Alliance for more comic facts, and check out comicsalliance.com for more comic awesomeness.